Hello everyone, this is Natalie Ellis and we are here at Ask the Therapist. It's Wednesday, August 29th. Oh, the month is almost over. The year is almost over, so definitely enjoy and appreciate every moment of every day because it goes by so quickly. So today on Ask the Therapist, we're going to talk a little bit about stress. Okay, oftentimes we're just not aware enough of how much things that happens around us and to us affect us. We often dismiss it, we often ignore it, we just keep going because we're resilient, we're strong, we got things to do. We're moms, we're dads, we're workers, we have so many roles and we do so many things. And so as we experience stress, we tend to dismiss it and ignore it because we don't want to stop. We got to keep going because there's just so much to do. And in this modern world, in this modern time, with technology and everything, we're constantly bombarded with things to do, things to say, things, we're constantly bombarded. And so it's important that we take time and pay attention to things that's creating stress in our lives, things that's causing stress to our bodies and to our minds and to us. And obviously there's natural stresses. Accidents today, one of my colleagues was talking about how she was almost hit by a truck. And so that could create stress, right? So there's things that happen to us on a daily basis that causes different levels and different layers of stress, okay? So some of those are natural and some of those are common and good. So stress is a part of life. However, we just need to really pay attention when it becomes overwhelming and becomes too much. Okay? So stress, a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from a demanding circumstance. Okay? So that's the state of mental or emotional strain. So that's one definition of stress. And then there's also stress is also the body's response to the situation. So stress happens in two folds. Your body's responding to it and your mind's responding to it as well. So stress occurs in two folds. Okay? So we're going to talk about stress, positive stress or acute stress. And positive stress is a normal part of healthy development characterized by brief increases in heartbeat and hormones levels. So that's considered positive or acute stress. And with that kind of stress also, let's see. With acute stress, again, that's this common stress that we all have. And so those type of acute stress, for example, with what I was saying with this coworker who almost got into an accident, that was a level of acute stress. And so in that moment, her body responded to the situation and she had to respond and react and very quickly to avoid the accident. And so those are acute stress. And some of that is positive too, because when it happens, when we're in a situation where there's an emergency, we have to respond quickly in order to protect ourselves, right? And then we also have tolerable stress, which could also be episodic or acute stress, and that activates the body's alert system to a greater degree, and as a result of a more severe and long-lasting difficulties or situations. And so sometimes we're in situations that are stressful for a longer period of time, right? And so we could be experiencing a loss. So after the loss of a loved one, so for a period of time we may be experiencing some levels of stress. So our body's responding to it as well as our minds and our emotions is responding to it. Natural disaster, maybe tolerable stress, divorce. Okay, sometimes we may have a situation at work that could be creating some type of tolerable stress. Okay, but the thing about those type of stressors too, when we have a supportive relationships, when we have people in our lives that support us, it keeps it from damaging or getting worse within our brain and within the body. So that's the other thing with stress too. When we experience stress, and we'll talk about toxic stress because that's what toxic stress is about. When we experience stress, there has to be a level of cool down. So in those moments, we may have a difficult situation, whether it's almost got into an accident, whether it's a trauma that may have happened. But then after a while, the body comes back to normal. Okay? And so for a short time, there could be a stress that happens. It could be tolerable for a period of time, but then the body comes back to normal. Okay? And then we have toxic stress. So in the toxic stress or chronic stress occurs when individuals experiences strong and frequent, long-lasting events. Okay? So if someone may experience some type of domestic violence may occur, physical, sexual abuse, or emotional abuse, people living in poverty, long-term poverty. People may be in a bad job where there's constant stress. When the stress is happening every single day and there's no time to separate from it, then that could become chronic stress. This type of stress can disrupt the brain's building blocks, okay? And so, again, our brain is constantly developing. And obviously, children experiencing stress is different than adult experiencing stress, but in some ways there's similarities as well, because our brain is constantly developing. Our bodies is constantly experiencing things. So when we go through different layers of stress, it impacts our minds, our bodies, okay, and our organs as well. It increases our stress level, okay? So that's another thing to pay attention to. All right. Stress, as I was saying, impacts our body's response to situations. So as stated, they are good stress as well. This allows us to be able to go to fight or flight. So when we're in a situation where there's danger, and so that at that moment we're stressed, but it allows us to move quickly to do what we need to do. Okay? So that could be a positive stress in terms of allowing us to get out of danger. Another positive stress can be some people get married. So in the moment of preparing for the wedding, that could become stressful, right? I have a client now that's a doctoral student. And in that moment, she's going through a lot of stress. But those are temporary stressors. And there's a positive at the end of that. And so acknowledging those things. So stress can help us act quickly in, like I said, emergency situations. Stress can affect our bodies physically as well as mentally. Our body responds to stress by producing chemicals and hormones. Okay? So our heart starts to beat fast. Our brain sometimes works faster when we're under stress. We get more energy when we're under stress. But oftentimes, too, we may shut down. So we have people who experience stress where they fight, flight, or they freeze. Okay, they fight because in the moment they fight, meaning they engage in the stress to be able to cope, or they leave it, or sometimes they just freeze. They just can't do anything. So there's different layers of stress in that way. Okay? But stress overall is meant to be temporary. So that's the other thing. So imagine that you're in a situation that's very, very stressful, okay? And that this becomes the norm. Okay, your heart's beating fast, your stomach is turning, your mind is racing, where you're constantly figuring out, okay, am I in danger? What's going on? Just unsure about what's going on. Okay, so when we're in constant stress and our body's constantly feeling as if it's in danger, then that can create detrimental health-related issues. Okay? So chronic and toxic stress is detrimental to our health. Okay? So it contributes to things such as heart disease, cancer, lung disease, suicide, increase in mental health issues, headaches, migraines. It impacts gastro issues, intestinal issues, respiratory issues. So stress can impact us in so many ways. People with asthma impacted. Okay? So stress can impact our bodies in so many ways. Because again, our bodies is overreacting. Okay? So imagine our bodies constantly overreacting to the situations that we're in. And it never has a time to break. Okay? All right. Furthermore, it can lead to emotional issues, depression, anxiety, addiction, anger. Okay? And this can also lead to issues in our relationships. So obviously when we're more stressed, we become short-tempered, irritable, our communication style changes when we're stressed, our interaction with others is different when we're stressed. And imagine being in those stressful situations in a chronic or in a toxic level, meaning day in, day out, this is what's going on. Okay? So as we talk about being aware of stress, it's important that we identify the source of our stress. Okay? Stress can come from so many different things. Again, could be things that we as adults can experience from our past that's still creating stress in our present as well. Okay, so definitely important to notice that. We could be reacting to things in the present from something that happened in the past because we're triggered by it. Okay, so being aware of that. Before I go into different ways to manage stress, I'm going to talk a little bit about there's different diagnoses in regards to stress. And so when we're noticing that we are in a position where we're in constant and chronic and toxic stress, it is going to impact us emotionally and mentally. And it's definitely important to seek help. When we're noticing that if our support network is not as effective, then it's important to seek professional help. Okay? And in seeking professional help, obviously there's assessments that's done to determine what the issue is and to determine the best treatment needs. And so people are oftentimes diagnosed with different things when it comes to stress. And so depression is a big thing when it comes to stress as well. Oftentimes people who are stressed are oftentimes depressed. There's anxiety. There's just a lot of anxiety associated with that. So they could be diagnosed with depression disorders, anxiety disorders. There's acute stress disorder, secondary stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's different diagnoses that's associated with stress. So obviously stress, as we know, does have a significant impact on us mentally and physically. And it's definitely been addressed and recognized in the mental health field. Okay? So ways to manage stress. First, again, before we could manage it, we first have to identify the things that's creating stress in our lives. Identify what's creating the stress. Be aware. Become aware of these things that's creating stress in our lives. Okay? And determine, once we're aware of the stress, how it's impacting our thinking, how we think about the world, how it's impacting our emotions, and then how it's impacting our actions. So emotions, but also our feelings in our bodies as well, body sensations. And so the awareness of all that in relation to stress. Okay? So there's multiple stress relieving strategies that we can use. Visual, positive visuals, imagery. So one thing that I do constantly when I'm throughout the day, because as a therapist, I often hear a lot of stressful things, which then puts my body and my mind in sometimes stressful states. And so throughout the day, I'm constantly checking in with myself to see how I am. And throughout the day, I implement different stress-relieving strategies. And so for me, a lot of stress-relieving strategies, one of the things that I do is I often do visualization, imagining myself. And for me, I imagine myself on the beach. And when I do the visualization, I incorporate all of my senses. So when I think of the beach, I think of, okay, what do I smell? What do I see? What do I hear? What do I taste? What do I feel? So I incorporate all of that in my visual to as if I am there, so that I could bring my body in a calm state, because the beach calms me. Okay, and for different people, it's different. So visualization is something that I do on a daily basis and throughout the day when I'm noticing where I am in terms of my stress level. Okay? It's important to eat healthy, making sure we're eating throughout the day, because that helps us, our strength. That's food and nourishment for our bodies, because again, if we're not nourished, if we're not strong, if we're not physically able, then as we're being stressed, then it becomes harder to manage Okay, so making sure we're eating, we're sleeping, um, the proper amount of sleep every night, and it's 6 to 10 hours for individuals, so make sure we eat and sleep. Exercising is very important. That's also very important in managing stress, exercising, and having a support system. So it's important to have a support system at all times, because that support system help us talk about the things that's going on with us and help us deal with things that's going on. When we feel all alone, it makes the things that we go through, it makes it, it compounds it and makes it worse. So it's important that we have a support system. Okay? If we're noticing that the stress is something that starts to impact our functioning, and so the chronic stress, the different layers of stress, and now it's impacting functioning, can't think straight, or your mind is consumed with your thoughts, can't concentrate, it's impacting concentration, not eating, can't eat, you want to isolate. So when we're noticing that the stress is becoming so much and we just can't handle it anymore, it's definitely important to seek professional help. Okay? Seeking professional help in regards to a counselor. So there's master's level counselors out there. So I'm an LPC, licensed professional counselor. There's psychologists, PhDs or PsyDs, which is psychology of doctorate of psychology. They're out there, as well as potentially a psychiatrist or MDs, and they prescribe medication. And so depending on the level of the symptoms, some people may need medication to help manage, and some people may not. So definitely it's important to, again, be aware of your stress level, be aware of the things around you that may be creating stress, and putting things in place on a daily basis to bring down the stress, okay? Dismissing it, not a good idea, because again, when we continue to dismiss the things that's causing stress, it just gets bigger and bigger. It builds up, and so it's important to recognize it, do something about it, and help bring it down again, versus kind of not recognizing it. Okay, so those are some things about stress that I wanted to talk about. I'm Natalie Ellis. I have a private practice in the Decatur, Georgia area, and a lot of my clients, this is some of the things we talk about: stress, ways to manage stress, recognizing the things that's creating stress in their lives, and how to cope and how to eliminate some things. I do talk a lot about it, and I had a segment before on setting boundaries. With a lot of clients, when we talk about stress, it's also about learning to set boundaries. A lot of people take on a lot of things, and then here they are stressed out because they're not sure how to manage it all and how to prioritize and organize everything they have going on. So setting limits and boundaries is an important part of managing stress. So it's important to be able to set boundaries and set limits with ourselves and with individuals as a way of managing stress. Okay, so thank you for listening in. I'm Natalie Ellis. I can be reached at esteemcounselingservices.com. Go to my website, www.esteemcounselingservices.com, if you're in need of any type of services or have any questions. So this was a little segment on Ask the Therapist, and we talked about stress today. Hopefully this was helpful. Mr. Timothy Moore, you're all I got. So if you have a question for me, go ahead and let me know before I log out. So thank you everybody for joining. And this was the segment today on stress. Thank you.